Ever feel like you're spinning your wheels trying to find that first deal? Well, you're not alone. Many aspiring wholesalers struggle with the same questions. Where do I find motivated sellers? What's the best list to get for free? Imagine having a treasure map that leads you straight to motivated sellers and the best deals. Well, in this video, I'm handing you that treasure map. We're going to be diving into the top 9 ways to find motivated sellers, and here's the best part. You can get these lists and start reaching out to sellers today, even if you're brand new to the business. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of what these lists are, why they're filled with motivated sellers, where to find them, and what's the best method for contacting these sellers for each specific list. After you watch this whole video, the only thing that will be standing between you and your first deal is taking action. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Wholesaling Freedom channel, where I teach you exactly how I quit my 9-to-5 job and built a successful wholesaling business, and how you can do it too. If you're new here, my name is Ralph and I quit the rat race to become a full-time real estate entrepreneur, and my goal on this channel is to help you do the same thing. Alright, so let's jump into it. First things first, what is a motivated seller? A motivated seller is someone who needs to sell their property, and usually they need to sell it fast. And because of that, they're willing to trade some equity for speed, convenience, and peace of mind, meaning that they're willing to sell to you at a discount in exchange for speed, convenience, and peace of mind. They're not just selling, they have a reason why they need to sell quickly, and they're usually open to creative solutions and cash offers. So a motivated seller isn't just hoping to sell, they're driven to sell. Something in their life is pushing them to make that decision, and usually they don't have a lot of time. The motivation could be financial pressure, a life event, legal trouble, or just plain burnout. Think about a garage sale. A motivated seller is someone having a garage sale the weekend before they move across the country. They're not trying to squeeze every dollar out of each item, they're trying to clear that stuff out fast. They're slashing prices, they're accepting offer, they're throwing in freebies, because for them, speed and convenience is more valuable than price. Now, some sellers could be extremely motivated, but they're keeping their poker face on. They're holding their cards close to their chest, and you'll have to do some detective work to uncover their motivation. But the important thing to understand is that in this business, you're not looking for people who want to sell. No, your best deals are going to come from the people who need to sell. All right, so let's dive into the top 9 motivated seller lists that you should be targeting in 2025. Number 1, foreclosures and sheriff sales. These are homeowners who have missed mortgage payments and are at the risk of foreclosure. They're often highly motivated to sell quickly to avoid losing their homes. Now, foreclosure is a sad situation. Someone owned their home for a while, and for some reason or another, they fell behind. There's nothing you could do to undo that. However, what you could do now that you're here is help them save the equity they have and avoid losing the home to the bank. When a seller has reached the point where they're about to lose their home to the bank will file a motion to have the property auctioned off to the highest bidder at what's called a sheriff sale. Foreclosures and sheriff sales are public information, meaning that this information is openly accessible to the entire public. Alright, so why is this list effective? Well, homeowners who are facing foreclosures and going up for auction, they may be open to your cash offer to avoid losing the home. Now, most people facing foreclosure end up getting some kind of loan modification, or they file bankruptcy, which stops the foreclosure. I won't go too much into that now, but many other people just end up selling the house and walking away. I've done hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of deals from the foreclosure list alone, so this is the number 1 list to target. Alright, so here's how to find these lists. Number 1 is check your county's public records or your clerk's office. You can literally Google your county and then Google foreclosure sales or sheriff sales or auctions, and then you'll be able to find the list for the properties in your market that are scheduled for foreclosure for the next month to 3 months. Then what you have to do is skip trace it to get their phone numbers, or you can knock on the seller's door directly and ask them if they're interested in selling, or you could send them some mail. This source is free, but it is time consuming. A lot of the lists of foreclosure sales are not organized in a way that makes it easy to just copy and paste and put it on a spreadsheet. And if you're going to upload your list to a skip trace service, you're going to need a clean spreadsheet or a CSV document, so it can be a little bit difficult. The other option is to use a list provider. Now, these are paid services that can gather and provide this data for you for a fee. You can use batch leads to pull lists of properties that are facing foreclosure. You can also skip trace these lists right in batch leads without the need to pay anything extra besides the monthly membership cost. Check out the link in the description below for a free 7-day trial, or just go to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com/data. Another paid source for getting this list quickly and easily is Real Supermarket. You can pull the list of pre-foreclosures, which is when the bank initially files a foreclosure, so basically it's not going up for auction yet, but the bank is beginning the process. This is a great time to catch sellers, or you could even get a list of upcoming sheriff sales or auctions in your area, and a bunch of other motivated seller lists that we're going to talk about later in this video. I'll leave a link in the description, or you could just go to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com/lists, LISTS, and you'll be able to get all those lists that we're going to talk about later in this video as well. All right, now let's talk about the best ways to reach out to these sellers on this list. Cold calling and mail is by far the top way to get in touch with these sellers. Now, mail is a more intermediate level strategy, so I wouldn't advise you, if you haven't done your first deal yet, I wouldn't advise you to go the direct mail route. I would wait till at least you've made $100,000 to $200,000 wholesaling before you start going into direct mail. Cold calling is probably going to be the best way and the cheapest way to do it. Mail is a little bit more expensive. I personally don't do any kind of door knocking. I know a lot of other people go and get this list of foreclosures and they knock on the door, but for me, I find it a little bit invasive and I've never done it, so it's up to you if you want to do that or not. Now, in terms of cold calling, I'm going to rate each one of these lists based on the cold call fatigue, which means how often are these people getting cold called by investors looking for deals. The foreclosure and sheriff sale list has a higher level of cold call fatigue. I mean, these people are getting called 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day from the moment the foreclosure is filed until the day they either save it or it's foreclosed on. All right, number 2 is the tax delinquent list. Now, these are properties where the owners have fallen behind on their property taxes. This often indicates financial distress, making them prime candidates for wholesaling. Now, property taxes are due every quarter, and most properties have a mortgage, so the taxes are kind of included in that mortgage price. Basically, when you pay your monthly mortgage, a part of that is kind of held in a separate account, and then when it's time to make the tax payments, your lender pays the taxes on the property. So if someone is behind on taxes, it usually means 1, their mortgage doesn't handle the tax payment, or 2, they own the property free and clear. They don't have a mortgage on it. So why is this an effective list? Well, if a seller is behind on property taxes, it may be an indication that they're facing some kind of financial hardship, and they may be motivated to sell to avoid further penalties or foreclosure. Also, there's a thing called tax liens. If you haven't paid your taxes for a certain amount of time, the county or the township will do what's called a tax sale. They'll basically offer any investor to pay the taxes, and they'll get a tax certificate. And in order for that seller to eventually sell their property, they either 1, have to pay off that tax lien plus interest, or 2, if they don't end up paying off that tax sale certificate in a certain time window, that person who paid their taxes, who bought the tax lien, may be able to foreclose on that seller and get the property, and all they had to pay was the cost of the taxes. So because of that, a lot of sellers are even more motivated to sell the property before losing it to a tax foreclosure. All right, so here's how to get this list. So 1, you can contact your local county tax assessor's office. Some of this information is available online, or you can do what's called an OPRA request, which is an Open Public Records Act request, or you can request this under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, both of these are legal acts. It's a law that states that information that's open and available to the public, if requested by someone, the county or the city office has to provide it, and they have a certain amount of time where they have to provide it by. So basically what you want to do is call your tax assessor's office and say, hey, I'm looking for all the properties in this particular city or zip code that are delinquent on their taxes or that owe a certain amount on taxes. Now, this is not the easiest list to get, again, because you're dealing with somebody from the county or township. They may try to make it difficult for you to get or tell you they don't keep that list or they don't provide that to the public. And this is the way you could gently remind them that you're requesting this information under the Freedom of Information Act. So it is a law that they do have to provide it for you. Now, you don't want to go in there and yell or make a big scene or be tough. What you want to do is go in kind and smooth, hat in hand, try to be humble, try to be kind about it. The saying goes, you do catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. Municipal workers are not always the kindest and sweetest people to deal with, so keep that in mind. Now, there are paid sources to get this information. It's not going to be a different list than what you would get on your own, but it just makes the process easier. You don't have to keep going back or keep calling or keep emailing to follow up. You could just pay for it and get the list on demand. Go to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com/data and you'll get a 7-day trial of batch leads where you can explore what different lists that they have, or you can go to wholesalingfreedom.com/lists, LISTS, and you'll get access to Real Supermarket and all the lists that they provide. Now, both of these are affiliate links, so we may get a small commission if you do purchase something from them. But if you're going to buy these lists anyway and you want to help support this channel, it would be great if you just use our affiliate link. All right, so what's the best method to reach people on the tax delinquent list? Number 1 is going to be cold call. Mail, again, would be another top option, but again, mail could be more expensive. Texting is probably going to be better than cold calling because sometimes somebody will read your message and then not respond, and then a month or two now, they might think about, yeah, I do want to sell. Oh, somebody did texted me a couple months ago asking if I'd be interested. Let me try to call them. So sometimes it might be more beneficial to text rather than call, but I'm always going to try to cold call them. Now, in terms of cold call fatigue, how often are these sellers getting called? If they're not on a bunch of other motivated lists, if the only thing they have right now is that they're delinquent on their taxes, they probably have a mid-level of cold call fatigue, meaning that they're not getting called a bunch, but they are getting called from time to time. The reason why it's a mid-level is because this list is harder to get. Either you have to do a lot of work with your county or you have to pay for it, and usually the lists that are harder to get have a lower level of cold call fatigue. Number 3, probate or inherited properties. These are properties that have been inherited after the owner's death. The heirs may not want to keep the property, especially if it requires maintenance or has an outstanding loan on it. I forget the exact statistic, but it's something like 50% of inherited properties are sold within the first 2 years after the owner's death. The word probate just means to prove the validity of a will. Now, the probate process can be complicated, but it's not impossible to learn. And if you can learn the probate process for your county or market, then that positions you as an expert problem solver for motivated sellers who have an inherited property. All right, why is this list effective? Well, that's one of the reasons right there, right? 50% of the people that inherit a property end up selling it within the first 2 years. So that means you have a 50% chance that you're probably talking to someone who's going to sell the property within the next 2 years. But also, heirs often prefer a quick sale to divide the assets quickly, making them motivated sellers. This list can also have situations where there's multiple motivating factors, like a foreclosure. The owner died, the owner had a mortgage on the property, the heirs can't pay, they're not sure what to do, and so the bank files a foreclosure. Some of my best deals have been inherited properties facing foreclosure. All right, how to get this list. So number 1, you could visit your local probate office or the surrogate court in your county. You could check online using the OPRA or the Freedom of Information Act, and you could say, hey, I'm looking for a list of all the properties that have filed a probate within the last 2 months or 3 months or a year. These probate records are public record. You could also Google what's the best way to get the probate list for your particular county. There are some paid lists. I use US Leads lists. I've used them for years. They're phenomenal. I've made a ton of money using these lists. Very low competition. One of the things that US Leads list does is it limits the amount of people they sell these lists to, 3 people per county. So at least you're not going to be competing with a bunch of other investors all calling the same list or all mailing the same list. Again, this is an affiliate. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in checking them out. Now, the best method for reaching out to probate leads, I'm going to say the number 1 method is always going to be direct mail. This is the number 1 strategy for reaching out to probates in my opinion. So direct mail is a level 2 or level 3. It's more like an intermediary experience level. And also probates is also, because it's a more complicated process, is also an intermediate level strategy. It's always best to mail them rather than call them. But if you don't have the budget for mail right now or you're just starting out, you can always cold call them. That would be the number 2 method. The only thing I would say when you're cold calling a probate list is that the conversation can be hard because 1, you're going to be either asking about the deceased person or asking about the property that they had. And so if this is somebody's uncle or mom or grandmother, it can invoke some grief. So it does require some extra skill and care to be able to be empathetic and be a human while also trying to find deals. So it's a different way to approach cold calling. You don't call probates the same way you would call foreclosure listing. I would never door knock a probate or inherited property. For me, it just doesn't really make sense. Again, I don't door knock anyway. In terms of the cold call fatigue, they have very low levels of cold call fatigue. I find that when my team's calling probate or when I was calling probate, I'm usually the first person calling about the property. If they're interested in selling, they're usually very open and talking. The biggest challenge they face is they don't know how the probate process works, and so it becomes a little difficult for them to navigate. Number 4, code violation lists. These are properties that have code violations, which often indicate neglect or abandonment. So basically how code violation works is somebody from the township, from the code enforcement office at the township, they drive around and they look for properties that have high grass, or maybe the roof's falling apart, or maybe they have a junky front yard, and they'll find them. And each time, if it's not repaired, they get another fine and they get another fine. So a lot of homeowners who get these code violation fines, they may be overwhelmed with fines and they're unable to maintain their property. And so there could be very motivated sellers on this list. So why is this list effective? If you own a house, you typically keep it in great condition with regular upkeep unless you can't afford to do so, aka financial hardship. So some owners with code violations, it may be an early indication of some financial problems that they may be having, and these owners may be eager to sell to avoid further penalties or have to pay for the cost of repairs. All right, how do you get this list? Again, you're gonna go right to your township or your county. You're gonna go to their code enforcement department. Every township or every county has a code enforcement department. You can Google your county's name, or your township's name and the word code enforcement office. You can go snoop around on their website and see if there's a way to either send them email or try to call them and see if there's a way to do an OPRA request or the Freedom of Information Act request, and tell them you're looking for properties that have been fined in the last year for having high grass or having a junky front yard or other types of violations. Or if you want to skip that whole process and just pay to get these lists, go to wholesalingfreedomacademy.com/lists, LISTS. All right, the best method to reach these sellers, cold call or mail, is going to be your top 2 ways to get to these sellers. Again, mail is a little bit more expensive. The second best way is to drive for dollars and leave a letter on the door. So if you're driving around and you see a property that has a high grass or junky front yard, siding is falling off, or anything that might indicate that it's unsafe, or you might even actually see a bunch of code violation notices on the door or in the mailbox, the best thing to do is write down that address, save it to skip trace and call them later. But I usually just either leave a letter on their door and I'll use blue painter's tape and I'll stick it right to the door as opposed to putting it in the mailbox, especially if the mailbox is already overflowing with mail. Or you could get a small 3x3 post-it and just handwrite a note. My name is Ralph. I have a question about your house. Please call me at, and then leave your phone number and just stick that right to their door. And that's a great way to get them to call you. Now, in terms of cold call fatigue, this list does have a very high level of cold call fatigue, not so much because a lot of people are able to get these lists from the county, but because there is a sign at the property that the seller may be facing some kind of financial hardship. So a lot of people that drive for dollars, they already identify these properties and they call them all the time. So they may experience a higher level of cold call fatigue. They may be getting a lot of calls. All right, number 5, vacant properties. Vacant homes can be a gold mine for wholesalers. These properties are often neglected and the owners may be absentee landlords or individuals that have moved away or don't even live in the state. These are the houses you see with boarded up windows, or the mailbox is overflowing, or the grass hasn't been cut in years. The houses are falling apart. They also probably have multiple code violations already, either taped to the door or in their mailboxes. All right, so why is this an effective list? Vacant properties often cost owners money without providing any kind of income, making the seller very motivated to get rid of it. See, just because the house is vacant, it doesn't mean that you can stop paying the taxes on it or stop paying the insurance. You still have to pay those bills, even though nobody's living at the property and it's not bringing you any sort of income. So the best way to get this is going to be Drive for Dollars. If you click the link below, I'll send you my free Driving for Dollars playbook, which goes through the whole process from beginning to end, soup to nuts. There's no real way to get the list of vacant properties from the USPS or any kind of like public list because they don't really share that kind of data. They do have some version of vacant property list available on Batch Leads. Personally, I don't think the data on the vacant properties are as accurate from these paid services. So I would always say the best way to find them is Drive for Dollars. The best method of outreach for these sellers is going to be cold calling or mail. Mail is going to be a little bit better if you have a different address than the actual property for the owner. So let's say the owner lives in another state and you're able to find their address, then mailing them will be a pretty good option. Obviously, if it's vacant, you can't door knock it. And for this list as well, they do have a higher level of cold call fatigue because they are called a lot. All right, number 6, absentee owner list. These properties are owned by individuals who do not live in them. So either they're rental properties or second homes. Now, this list is basically just a list of people that own a property, but the tax bill is being sent to a different address. So it doesn't exactly mean it's motivation, but if you can find an absentee owner list that's combined with other motivating factors, there can be opportunities there. All right, why is it effective? Absentee owners may be tired of managing the property, especially if it's not generating income, or if they're out of state and there are other motivating factors like foreclosure or tax delinquency. How to get this list? You can use the county tax records to identify properties that have different mailing addresses for the tax bill. Again, you can use the OPRA or Freedom of Information Act to call these township offices. And you can just say, hey, I'm looking for a list of properties in this zip code or in this city that have the tax bill going to a different address. And if they ask you what you're doing it with it for, or what do you need this information, just say, hey, I'm just requesting this information under the Open Public Records Act, or I'm looking for this information under the Freedom of Information Act. I'm doing a report, or I'm putting together a statistics report about some data from the county. Most of the time they'll send it to you. It might need some follow-up. Again, always remember you're gonna get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, so try to be nice, try to be friendly when you call. Again, you could also pull these lists on Batch Leads. All right, the best method of outreach for absentee owners will be cold call or mail. Mail will be better if you have their actual mailing address. There is a very, very high level of cold call fatigue. Most wholesalers start out calling the absentee owner list. It's the cheapest list to get. It's the most common list that a lot of wholesalers and investors call. So It's very good to practice on. You're gonna have to call a lot of absentee owners before you find deals, unless it's mixed with some other motivating factors like foreclosure or tax delinquency. All right, number 7, Zillow for sale by owner, or what they call FSBO, FSBO. FSBO listings on Zillow are homeowners trying to sell their house without an agent. Now, they may be open to creative financing or quick sales, but they basically, for one reason or another, decide to list their home on Zillow by themselves instead of using a real estate agent. Usually, they're trying to avoid paying commission, which may be a sign of some kind of financial burden. They need to get as much money as they can out of selling the property. So why is it effective? Well, number 1, you know these sellers are already looking to sell, and they may be more flexible without an agent involved. How to get this list? Obviously, the easiest way, go right on Zillow, search FSBO listings in your target area, and you'll find all the properties that are available for sale. The best method of outreach is going to be cold call because the number is right there on Zillow. Just keep in mind that they do have a high level of call fatigue because real estate agents do target these lists as well so that they can get listings. The best thing to do here is to call the seller and try to set up an appointment where you can go meet with them in person. And then when you're there is when you have to become the detective, try to uncover motivation, see if you can provide solutions for them, and then you're able to get the property at a great price. All right, the next list, number 8, is a little bit harder to get. This is the water shutoff list. These are properties that have had the water shut off by the city, so it usually indicates some kind of financial distress or abandonment. Maybe they haven't paid the bill, or maybe the account has been inactive for so long, or the property is vacant. Why is it effective? Well, no water usually means the property is uninhabitable, so that means that the property is vacant. And again, a property that's vacant is still costing the seller money, so the owner may be motivated to sell. Now, if it's combined with other factors like foreclosure or tax delinquent, then that's definitely an opportunity. How to get this list? The best way, probably the only way you're going to be able to get this list, is to request it from your local water utility company. Again, using the OPRA or the Freedom of Information Act to get this list. It can be very difficult. Some townships or some cities will tell you they don't provide that list, so you do have to be a little bit persistent. Keep in mind, the harder the list is to get, the less people that are calling it, and so you'll have some good luck there. I haven't really found any paid sources that provide this list. All right, the best method of outreach. The best method is going to be cold calling, again, because they have a low cold call fatigue because the list is very hard to get. Number 9 is eviction records, tired landlord lists, or for rent listings. Now, these are rental property owners who recently had to evict a tenant, and so they're usually done. They're frustrated, they're over with dealing with the property, and they're ready to offload that property because it's a headache for them. Or if you target for rent listings on Zillow, these are property owners who have had a vacant unit for several months, and there may be some motivation there because the landlord is losing money every single month. So why is it effective? Well, the eviction process is very messy. It could be very long. If a landlord has a tenant that hasn't paid rent and they have to go through the eviction process, they probably lost out on months of rent. So they often want to just be done with the property. They also maybe just be tired of dealing with tenants in general or property management. So these sellers are often very motivated and open to cash offers. All right, how to get this list? Best way to get this list is going to be 1, search your local court records for recent eviction filings. You can call your local county clerk and say, hey, I'm looking at a list for all of the recent evictions filed in the county in the past month or 3 months, and then you can get this list and then skip trace it. Again, so you have to explain to them what you're looking for the list for. Most of the time, I would just use the Open Public Records Act or the Freedom of Information Act as the reason why I'm looking for it. I would tell them I'm looking for statistical data or I'm putting together a report. I wouldn't necessarily tell them I'm a wholesaler, I'm looking to call these people, because technically they're still supposed to provide you with that list, but if you tell them what you're going to use it for, they might make it a little bit more difficult for you to get. So the less they know, the better. You can also call or visit the county courthouse in person. A lot of times, this is probably going to give you the best access because you're in front of somebody talking to them, and you can be kind and be charming, and you might be able to get them to give you that list. This, of course, is if you're local. If you're not local, then calling or emailing is probably going to be the best way to get that list. There's really no paid way to find the list of evictions. However, you can check Zillow for properties that are being rented out, and I would target the ones that have been on the market looking for a tenant for a long time, because long vacancies really hurt landlords, and so that may create some motivation. Best method for outreach is going to be cold calling or mail. If it's a for rent ad on Zillow, the number is going to be right there for you to call. If it's an eviction, then you're going to have to use a skip tracing service to get their number. Again, you can pay for it with batch leads, or you can go to truepeoplesearch.com. I wouldn't mail them because if they're a landlord, they probably own more than one property. Sometimes you're going to be mailing a business address. They probably get a ton of mail anyway, so it's probably going to be low success rate for mailing these landlords. However, in terms of cold call fatigue, they do have low or moderate level cold call fatigue, especially if they have a for rent ad. Most of the people that are going to be calling them are going to be people who are looking to rent the property, not necessarily investors. All right, those are the top 9 lists to find motivated sellers. Now, if you're serious about building a wholesaling business, then you need to keep your pipeline full with leads. And these 9 lists are where you need to be hunting. Target them, market consistently, and follow up, and you'll start seeing results in no time. Once you reach out and you find a motivated seller, it's time to make them an offer. Watch this video next on how to calculate your MAO, your max allowable offer, so that you can be sure you're making a great offer every time. And if you found value in this video, then hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.